Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The holiest day of the Christian calendar turned to tragedy yesterday, as you know, in Sri Lanka. In a series of coordinated attacks, suicide bombers struck 3 Catholic churches as well as hotels in cities across the country. At least 290 people were murdered, hundreds more were wounded. Sri Lankan authorities say the attackers were affiliated with a local terror group. The attackers were radical Muslims. Their motives were religious. Their targets were Christians. None of that is speculation. It's true. And maybe because it is so true and so obviously true, nobody in authority wanted to say it out loud. So instead, they went to great lengths to avoid clear language. Quote, "The attacks on tourists and Easter worshippers in Sri Lanka are an attack on humanity," tweeted Barack Obama. Hillary Clinton used the same awkward phrase. "I'm praying for everyone affected by today's horrific attack on Easter worshippers and travelers in Sri Lanka," she wrote. Easter worshippers. Why not just say Christians? Nobody worships Easter. There's a reason, of course. Euphemisms are never accidental. Our leaders believe Christians are the problem. They're the dangerous ones. They can't be trusted. Tell them the truth and they might go crazy and organize a new crusade, unsheath their swords and march on Jerusalem. You never know with Christians. Just tonight, the Washington Post ran a story with this headline, quote, "Sri Lanka church bombings stoke far-right anger in West." As if you'd have to be some kind of Nazi to be upset about church bombings. That's what they seem to think. That's why our leaders consistently ignore the persecution of Christians around the world. When U.S. policy contributes to that persecution, and it does, they say nothing about it. For example, less than 20 years after we overthrew Saddam Hussein, 3/4 of Iraq's once thriving Christian population is gone. They've either been murdered by Islamic extremists, ISIS in some cases, or they've been driven out of the country as refugees. In Syria, Christians live for generations under the protection of the Assad family. You're not allowed to say that anymore or even know it, but it doesn't make it any less true. It is true. And you can talk to the hundreds of thousands of Christians who fled the country since the U.S. began supporting the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad if you want to know details. But no one in the American media ever asks their opinion. Nobody cares. Nor do we care that so many of our allies in the Middle East, countries that receive billions in U.S. tax dollars every year, repress Christianity. Afghanistan, for example, receives billions from us every year. Why? So we can turn it into Belgium. But right now in Afghanistan, converting to Christianity carries a death sentence if you're a Muslim. The same is true in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, both countries backed by the United States. In Egypt, conversion is legally restricted, and while it doesn't carry a death sentence, polls show that most of the public in Egypt wishes it did. So where's our State Department in all this? Our State Department, which spends a lot of time looking out for the human rights of people in countries you can't pronounce. They ignore it. When was the last time the United States pushed another country to treat Christians better? Well, in some cases, it would be pretty easy to do that. We could just demand that Saudi Arabia or Pakistan or Afghanistan, countries that are dependent on us, implement full freedom of religion before we give them any more U.S. aid. Why wouldn't we do that? Because we're being afraid of being criticized by the nihilists at the Washington Post?